You're listening to For the Republic, a love letter to Star Wars animation.
Hello there.
All right, everyone, welcome back to For the Republic, a love letter to Star Wars animation. It is Andrew and Donovan back here once again to talk about The Bad Batch, Season 3, Episode 9, The Harbinger. But we are not alone. We needed someone, an Asajj Ventress expert, to talk about the subject of the return of Ventress. We've been waiting all season, and who better to talk about Ventress than Catrina Dennis? How are you doing today?
I'm so good. It's been a really good week for me personally.
I
can't
even imagine.
The best hunch ever for the last week with Bad Batch. I got to applaud you for that.
Honestly. Oh man. I of course we all knew at the beginning of the season when they dropped that trailer, but I've been sitting on this for a while because they sent me screeners ahead of time, and so I had the end of episode 8 just sitting there for 5 weeks. I was like, I know episode 9 is Ventress. I just know it. I know it, but I can't say it or else I'll break my NDA. So I just had to sit here and be like, I don't know when you can book me for Ventress.
You were sitting on that for 5 weeks. That's crazy. That must have been torture waiting for
And just at the end of episode 8, you're like, so I might be free next week if anyone wants to come on and talk Ventress with me.
Basically, yeah. Look, I hold my NDAs because I want Lucasfilm to hire me someday to be a real Ventress consultant. So I'm real good at that.
Very qualified for the job.
Probably around a year and a half ago, Connor and myself had Catrina on to talk about one of your short stories, Ventress Golden. Yes. So this has been kind of leading up to this moment. For I don't think at that time we thought that this would even be a possibility. And yet here we are. I just want to know what your reaction was when that trailer came out and you heard Nico Futterman's voice again and saw Ventress golden lightsaber and all. What was just your immediate reaction to that?
So I had just woken up that day and I hadn't looked at Twitter yet, where a bunch of messages were like, is Catrina okay? The first person to text me about it was my friend Arzu from the Geeky Waffle and Collider. And she was like, you need to watch the Bad Batch trailer right now. And I just knew in that second, I was like, no, really? No. And so I watched it. And then the moment I heard her voice, I made a sound that I had never heard before. Just like this, a full body reaction to just seeing her, this ultimate disbelief, and going I can't believe they brought her in here. And then suddenly it was no, it makes absolute sense that she'd be coming back through this show. And I think from the beginning, even before before Jennifer Corbett and Brad Rouse started talking about how, we have more planned for Ventress, I was like, this is the first of many. This is the start of a much bigger story for her. Because there's no way she could just come back and then blip out of there. Not with Ahsoka out there. If Ventress is still alive, Ahsoka's going to track her down and find a way to work with her. Not with Quinlan and the path being set up in Obi-Wan. I knew there was something more. And so it's been very, very exciting, super reassuring to know that we have more Ventress stories awaiting us after this. And just we'll talk about it, but the episode itself was so perfect. And it also does not break the canon of my short story, Ventress Golden. So just also all around wins.
Yeah. The beauty of this episode was because you had so many people well, why didn't they tell us? It's this isn't the story for that. It's very clear that we're going to be getting more, and we're probably going to be getting quite a bit more. So
it would have made sense if she'd started expositing to the batch how
you didn't need to stop the episode dead and be like, you 3 clones that I just almost tried to kill. Here's why I'm alive. We didn't need that scene. It wouldn't have meshed well. But gonna get it, and we'll talk about the whole episode. And it's happy times here on For the Republic.
I've got to say, I feel you there with the making a noise you'd never made before. I had the exact same reaction when Huyang spoke for the first time in the Ahsoka trailer, and I realized it was David Tennant again. I've been hoping they wouldn't recast, and I was so happy that happened. I made like a noise that I think my dad described as like an Irish pixie. I
love that. Yep. Yeah. Just I would say mine is much more gruff. It was like a howl. But it was, I love it. I hope every Star Wars fan gets to feel that feeling for like they're not, I mean, I wouldn't classify Ventress necessarily as a Glup Shido at this point, but like their guy in the story. Cause like all of us Star Wars fans have like that one guy that like when they come back or they're on screen or they like walk around in the background, we're like, oh my God, that's my guy. And
yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think everyone's had that moment where a character comes back or they announce that someone is returning to the role, whether it be at Celebration or D23 or when Ewan was announced to be coming back to be Obi-Wan. It's like all of those moments just are very special. And the fact that we have them now in all these different forms of mediums for all these different characters is just tremendous. And I hope we keep getting more because it's great. But before we get into the actual discussion, we have a little fun segment on this pod that we like to call the Jedi Archives.
Impossible. Perhaps the archives are incomplete.
This is our little fun podcast Hall of Fame segment where we each nominate something Star Wars related, but we put it up to a Twitter poll after the episode drops, and you, the viewers, get to decide on what goes into the archives. Don, last week there was no once it was said, we had no shot. May from the Acolyte is the newest member of the archives that was nominated by our guest last week, Mo, and there was just no shot. Once
I mean, my nominee was Freck, so I knew I had no chance.
I'm not gonna lie to you. The first like 3 minutes you were talking about Freck until you said the Galaxy's Greatest Snitch, I thought you were talking about who's the character from Battle Scars that Marin's love interest. I was like,
oh,
I can't believe I've forgotten her name. I really liked that character as
very
well.
Similar sounding name. I was like, did I miss something in that book? And then I realized you were talking about
a really good character,
Zach Braff from Kenobi. Yeah, no, that's
a weird story.
God. But Donovan, so I think we decided before we started recording that we're just gonna put Ventress in as there's no way anyone but her was going to win. So we have 2 nominations this week. Don, start us off because I'm still thinking of mine. So start us off.
So my nominee for this week's edition of the Jedi Archives is going to be the one, the only, the Blade of Bardota himself, Porter Engel. I have just finished the Blade miniseries by Charles Soule. I got the lovely paperback that came out I got it a couple weeks ago. Blitzed it. I'm making headway through my my High Republic backlog now. I'm so close to finishing Phase 2. I've just got 3 stories left. But Porter Engel is such a cool character. I love the idea of this kind of swashbuckling character, Jedi who has lived for hundreds of years. It's really cool that we're getting Jedi that live in different eras of the galaxy aside from Yoda. And I love that he's this really accomplished sword fighter, but he's also a passionate cook as well. And I love that we have this balance of him being introduced in Phase 1 as like a kindly cook that just has retired but still has got that dog in him during the fight scenes, and then we get to see him in his prime during the Quest for the Jedi era with his sister Barash, which the Blade itself is a really good story. It's pretty self-contained compared to the rest of Phase 2. You can kind of read it at any point, I would say. Like, you could read it at the start or like at the tail end of the Phase 2 stories, and it would fit in anywhere. But yeah, I really love Porter Engel, and I've said this before, but I if he ever shows up in live action, I would personally love for Nick Offerman to play that character. I just something about him. Yes. I just feel fits the character. You know, I broke the lightsaber. It burned my hand, so I punched it.
Oh, I love it.
I like to stockpile Nile blasters in my private quarters.
We need that now. I think no one but Nick Offerman can play Porter Engel at this point. As for myself, I've decided I don't necessarily want to nominate this, but I just think Star Wars Twitter and how creative, in quotation marks, they can be at points needs to be pointed out, because the ship name that they have given for Ventress and Crosshair
I should
is
have known.
something else.
Oh,
So my nomination is, of course, Ass Hair. Why Star Wars
Oh
Twitter?
my
I love it.
Why?
I honestly, and we'll talk about this later in the episode, but before I was kind of like, oh, they're like redemption buddies. They see one another in another. And then I was like, that's fine. And then I came across that and I was like, oh, now I ship it.
Now
Just for the name. I absolutely ship it. So, yes.
Yeah.
Do I get
There was-
another nomination?
Yes, you do.
All right, we joked around a little bit before the episode, but I have decided that my nomination this week is Grogu's aunt Pelimoto.
Fantastic!
I love Pelly so much. I think she's such a wonderful and cool supporting character, and I'm also a lifelong Amy Sedaris fan. When I was young, I was watching Strangers with Candy much earlier than I should have. And I got hooked to her character work, and just like the sound of her voice is so distinct. And so when Pelly showed up and I heard her voice, I was like, oh my God, Strangers with Candy! I love her.
I also love Petley. I think Petley is just such a great character, like such a singular creation in The Mandalorian that, like, again, it just showed the kind of subversive nature of the show. Like when you had the trailers coming out and the initial cast being revealed, it kind of seemed like a very gritty, like, oh, this is for tough boys, like Star Wars show. And you would never have expected a character like Pelimoto to pop up with her like squawking band of pit droids and her like slowly accruing droid collection with the BD unit and R5, bless his soul. But she's a great character, and I just, she won us all over. I think the minute she just started doting on Grogu, like, she was all of us in that moment,
And
so
who doesn't want to grow up to be like the equivalent of a wine aunt, but like a wine aunt cat lady who is actually a wine aunt droid lady? Like, I absolutely, that's like one of my aspirations in life, is just own a bunch of droids and lightsabers and like have adorable nieces and nephews.
that's excellent aspirations.
All right, so those are our nominations for the week. Ventress is like we said, just given a pass because she'd win regardless. So our nominees are Ass Hair, which parentheses Ventress X Crosshair, Porter Engel, the Blade of Ardota, and Pelimoto. So we will have the poll up right after the episode drops, and you guys can decide what goes in. I'm gonna have to put a disclaimer for those who don't know what the ship name is for my nomination. They'll be like, "You're nominating what this week?"
I've never seen one of those in Star Wars.
Yeah, not on camera at least. But when we get into the full episode, I just love how they like really didn't waste any time. It's like we're right away. We're getting to Ventress. The Batcher senses something while him and Omega, or her and Omega, I apologize, my dear Batcher, are going through the cave, and we see a ship, and I'm like immediately like working through my brain, like, is that Ventress's ship? Is it? And then we see Ventress, and various screams were had. It was
Yep.
It was just a wonderful, wonderful moment. So I saw your reaction on your social media to this scene, but to those who maybe have not, give us just a brief description of you seeing Ventress on screen for the first time since, I want to say 2013 was the last time we saw her.
Yeah, on screen. Yeah,
season 5.
So like it's been a decade, and I just, man, that moment, like she first off, she's like lit like a horror movie monster, which I absolutely love. It's this wonderful like callback to who she was and who she is stepping into the light, which just like it was fantastic. And I'm glad that like Omega's the first one to discover her, because this episode, Ventress is a core part of this episode, but it's about Omega and who she is, and it I think marks a major turning point in her journey that we're going to see very different things come out of. But to see Ventress just like, and she looks so beautiful. Like I was just so happy that you could just get this beautiful view of her. And I don't know, like it warmed my heart. It made me so happy. It's like, you know, my prodigal daughter has returned. Happy Easter.
Beautiful.
I love it. She is risen. I love it. Like I was so happy. It's been so many years where I'm just like, there's no way she's dead, and it feels so invigorating, validating.
Yeah, no, it was something special, and it added to the growing list of characters we have that are immediately forming this attachment to Omega, which I can't get enough of every single time it happens. And I just love how just right off the bat we get just trademark Ventress sass, like, you know, for clones trying to hide, you sure were easy to find.
It was like pulling Omega out like by the arm, like a stern parent almost. Like
anything.
Yeah, it was just like it was such a perfect dynamic because I love that Ventress immediately started testing Omega to see if she was force sensitive, because there were obviously cool parallels with like Luke and Rey training, but I just it felt like such an authentic dynamic where, you know, Omega is of course really eager to learn and just really excited, but also frustrated and impatient, and Ventress is also a different degree of frustrated and impatient. Like, you know, of course, Omega would very quickly get on her nerves with her relentless enthusiasm. Like the bit where Omega was talking and Ventress just like put a hand over her mouth to say, quiet, focus. It was just perfect moment. Hilarious.
I loved it. I think like this episode, even though you could tell Ventress was frustrated and annoyed, like this episode, just in that test of her patience, shows how much she has changed from the Ventress we knew in Clone Wars season 1. And Ventress's MO throughout her Vendemption era has been helping and saving young girls in distress, because she was once a young girl in distress. So she famously helps Ahsoka, but she also, in the Age of Republic comics, she saves 2 young girls who are being accosted by a man who wants to steal their food, and she cuts his arm off. And then in Bounty, of course, she saves that young woman who was going to be sent off to be a child bride. And I think that you see Ventress's empathy like on full display here. Like she doesn't compromise who she is at her core, but one of the best quotes in Dark Disciple is that it's never too late to make the choice to be better. And that I think is going to guide the rest of her journey.
Oh, absolutely. Like you can tell, like there's still like all the core tenements of Ventress's character are still there, but you can tell that this is a different character than the last time we saw her. Even those that didn't read Dark Disciple and don't say no that she turned to the light or that she even perished. So we thought. Those that weren't familiar with that can like watch this episode and then watch the Clone Wars stuff and be like, yeah, no, stuff has happened and she's just a different person.
Yeah,
she has a lot like, oh, you know, I am not your enemy. I'm like, I am many things, but I am not your enemy.
And I like that you brought up the folks who didn't read Dark Disciple and didn't know that she died, because that's something that like I cannot count on my hands how many times I have had to break the news that Ventress died to Star Wars fans that are still like big Star Wars animation fans and just never picked up that book, and they were like, she died? Like I thought she just left. And I think that making the choice to not mention her death in this episode was a good way to make the rest of her story accessible to a wide audience. So I think that, you know, beyond the fact that like I don't think Ventress would tell the clones her business, I think storytelling wise that was a really smart choice, because you don't want to like have her come back and be like, here's like 10 minutes of flashbacks so that you know what happened in Dark Disciple.
Yeah.
And instead we focus on Omega.
I thought they handled it storytelling wise perfectly. Of, hey, here's this character you all know and love. She's back. We're not going to tell that story just yet of how she's back, but we're going to tell it. So there's something you can look forward to. And which is why I don't get why there's so many people that have been like, oh, there they are again, retconning canon again. I'm like, if they're explicitly going out of their way in interviews to say that, hey, we're acknowledging Dark Disciple when we're creating this character and we're going to tell that story, it's just not this story.
Yeah.
Like, that means that if they're saying it repeatedly, to me, that means that they're going to tell it.
Yeah.
And I've already seen people
I'm not sure,
theorizing. I've already seen people theorizing as well about like how she could have survived, and it makes a lot of sense. Like, you know, a popular theory I've seen is when spoilers for Dark Disciple, when the whole thing with the sleeper and Quinlan Voss's trial, where he has to kill the sleeper in order to sort of tap into the dark side. A lot of people have theorized that the energies of the sleeper, the lifeblood, flowed into the waters of Dathomir and created a kind of pool of life, because that the sleeper's appendages and fluids are what the Night Sisters use to help channel their magics, channel the kind of magics they would use on Asajj Ventress and Darth Maul, and even Ventress herself when she comes back to the fold in season 4, I think. So there's a lot of wiggle room, and besides the whole retconning thing, I'm going to kind of like call to something that Jared said on Twitter like the other day, where he mentioned that like it's some people just don't have a weird thing with like treating retconning like it's a dirty word, because this isn't strictly a retcon, but even if it was, Star Wars has a history with retcons. Retcons are an inevitable part of writing a long form story. You will wind up retconning something at some point, and you know, there are good examples of it, there are bad examples of it. It's just a writing tool at the end of the day. It's like getting mad at a screwdriver because someone used it to put up a shelf poorly. Like, it's just you know, it's baffling to me, for sure.
And I like that you brought up the sleeper and the fact that like people are saying it's a retcon, or like, oh, it goes against Dark Disciple, because there is, and I don't want to like get too far ahead of us, but there are multiple scenes in this episode that call back to things that happened to her in Dark Disciple. From her saying, I've got more lives left to live, to that big scene with that sea creature, that in itself is a parallel to Dark Disciple, to her Night Sister training. Instead of having to kill this creature like mercilessly, not thinking about the fact that it is sentient, it has feelings, it was provoked. Ventress instead finds a way to connect with this creature, and it is the biggest, like, to me, the biggest Dark Disciple callback is this person who once told Quinlan Vos that he has to murder this innocent creature is now empathetic and trying to resolve something with kindness and compassion.
Which it leads to one of my favorite genres of things, which is Jedi using the Force to calm down big scary creatures. Which every single time we get a scene like this, I love it. Especially in animation, I just feel like it works really well in that medium. Not to say it doesn't work well in live action, but like when we had Ahsoka do it in Tales of the Jedi, when it was Ezra and Rebels, and now with Ventress here. And I think it just means more because we know who she was. We know that she was the Sith assassin. And to see that now where she's on the complete other spectrum of the Force and using the Force for good, and to not just, all right, we're just going to mow this sucker down right here. Like, we're actually going to solve this in a more peaceful manner. I really liked that. And I thought it was a really powerful scene. To add on to what you were saying, though, Donovan, about retcons and stuff like that, I don't consider this a retcon, because to me, if it was a retcon and if they were negating Dark Disciple, to me it would be, oh, that story never happened. She never went through this. It's just, we're going to pretend that didn't happen. To me, it very clearly did happen, because we see things, not only just her demeanor being different and the I have many lives left to live, or a few lives left line, but also we see very subtly, very like different scars and markings on the face.
There's a lot of deliberate close-ups on Ventress's face to show you that detail, which again props to the animation. The animation is sublime in this episode. So many good shots, like the shot of her facing off against the Batch in the cave. That, as you said, the amazing scene with the underwater creature. This episode is marinated with love for Dark Disciple. There's not just the look of Ventress with the light yellow lightsaber and the hair and the outfit. There's the whole sequence with the creature. Like, the first thing I immediately thought of was the sleeper, because it's a very deliberate parallel. And her, as you said, Catrina, her calming the creature instead of killing it is a very deliberate inversion of where she was in that narrative at that point.
And it fits great with the Bad Batch as a show too, because the Bad Batch loves their giant monsters.
Exactly. And there's also the snake pauldron as well. I mean, I can't take credit for that. Alex from Star Wars Explained pointed that out. But there's the snake pauldron on her shoulder, and then there's the creature's eye. The pupil is very deliberately designed, almost kind of like a snake, to evoke that kind of lesson that Ventress tried to teach Quinlan in Dark Disciple, and to show how she's very much progressed on from that, and she is now very much in the light. And it's just it's really cool that we see Ventress kind of like still struggling with that, like the earlier moment when she tries to summon the fish to demonstrate to Omega how you can open yourself to the Force, but she accidentally summons the giant creature and irritates it because she isn't like fully on board with channeling the light yet. She's still obviously like carrying some both literal and figurative scars from her time in the Clone Wars and her time with Count Dooku. It's just a really nuanced portrayal of the character.
Yeah.
And I loved the brief moments. We're jumping all over the episode at this point, but I loved just that brief moment when they confront her about being a former assassin for the Separatists, and she just says, like, we were all pawns to the Empire. And even though we've seen moments in the show where we've seen people that didn't used to be allies to the Republic, things kind of changing now because of the war. We had that great episode in season 2 where they work with the old Separatist family, and it takes them a moment to be like, hold on, it's not the war anymore. They're still like in the mindset of the Clone Wars in a way of, well, she was our enemy, and Omega just kind of, because she's always the one that sees change and that people can do good before the others, and she just straight up goes up to Crosshair like, well, you changed. Like, yeah. He's like, you're being naive.
Yeah, and
I never gave up on you, did you? And he just sits there in silence.
He had no retort as well. He was just like, you've got a point there.
Crosshair. I gotta bring up one of my favorite scenes in the episode, which was like the very first scene, which was when Wrecker and Crosshair are helping out the people on the ship. So they're like, oh, thanks, Crosshair.
I love that because people are shipping Crosshair and Ventress, but like that is a great connection between the two of them, because Ventress used to be someone who, during her redemption, she begrudgingly helped people, but like if you called out like, hey, you did a good thing, she'd be like, I'm out, leave me alone, don't talk to me. like I don't know what you're talking about. And now she like admits to it, like when Omega says like, you chose to stay. Not only is that like, I love getting deep on her, by the way. It's a great callback to the fact that like Ventress was a runner when she was a Sith acolyte, whether she ran from battle, she ran from like having to face her past or her abuse. Being able to say like she stayed was such a major turning point in her character. And I also like that you bring up Omega's intuition in people, because I think that throughout the series, if Omega had the Force, that was the number one indicator. Omega has never been wrong about someone. And it reminds me of people like Leia and like Finn, who just have that knowing. And that's the core of their Force power. That's what makes them good negotiators, good fighters, and good friends. It's like they have that intuition.
And I just loved the adorableness of the scene where Omega's like, oh, well, the M count, it's like, my friend is being hunted. And then the minute Ventress says, or Hunter says Jedi, it's like, wait, so I'm a Jedi? I mean, my friend.
the writers really get how to make Omega authentically feel like a child. Like not so like she's very mature for her age and she's very savvy about stuff, but there are just moments when she still acts like a kid. She's still like she does that very kind of impulsive, oh no, it's a friend of mine, and then she immediately slips up when there's the thought of her even potentially becoming a Jedi enters the friend. I think that's a good moment for me to bring up the midichlorians.
They said the word,
which they said the word. Like, we haven't heard the word midichlorians since 2005. This is nuts.
That's
like
crazy to me when someone said that they went the entirety of the Clone Wars without saying that once.
Yeah, they ran well away from it. It was the one thing that, like, it was one of the things that there was a lot of backlash to in the 2000s, back when the prequels were first coming out. Because, again, I said this like a couple of weeks ago, in the last couple episodes we did. I really feel like the more I've sat on the midichlorians, because I was one of those people at first. I was kind of like, oh, the midichlorians are stupid. They're reducing the Force to a blood infection. They're taking it away from like the supernatural stuff. And I'm like, I feel like myself and a lot of people kind of missed what George Lucas was trying to do with the concept of midichlorians. There was a lot more, considering that he wanted to go into like microbiology in later films. That was one of the things he discussed like doing, and like exploring the wills back then as being like these microbiotic beings that that channeled the Force, and that explains the line, oh, we are symbionts with them, life forms living together. It was a lot more kind of a mind-bending thing that was going on. But I really like the way, I feel like the writing is so on point here with the midichlorians, because I feel like it very cheekily kind of like tweaks the nose of all the people who were kind of like asserting that it means that it's like reducing the Force to a blood infection. Like, you know, how Ventress has that line where she says, oh, your blood doesn't make you a Jedi. And it's very deliberately kind of like, oh, it's a physical manifestation of the Force in people, and it fluctuates depending on like how in touch someone is with it. It's not like a genetics thing, really, which I really appreciated the way the writers like would set the record straight with that through Ventress as well, like especially with a character who has no time for anyone's bullshit with regards to like nitpicking and stuff.
And it was just nice to get that point, like I mentioned last episode, it's a weird case where we've had this mystery throughout the show that the audience is totally aware of, but the characters aren't. I feel like that was a weird subversion of how they've been telling the story, but it was nice to like have that mention of, okay, here's someone explaining what M-count experiments are. Here's what midichlorians are. Or, I mean, she didn't even explain it, but just said, drop the midichlorians line. It's like, oh, it's something that's in all of us, but you know, it can, if there's a high count in certain individuals, it means that they're more susceptible to being Force sensitive, and that's when we get the great and the Hunter's like, you mean Jedi? It's like, I'm a Jedi. It's like, no, and then we get those great little training moments, which I loved it, of her just like. She's trying to focus, but she's still a kid, so she can't like. Oh, it's like, oh, I keep falling or whatever it was there, and I just love the later in the episode. It was like, well, it's like, how am I doing? It's like, well, you failed the first test, like, but I passed the second test, so I must be doing something right.
And I also love when Ventress sends Omega off to do that task, get the flower from the top of the island, and Omega protests, and Ventress just gives her this glare of like, just do it. It was just so very authentic to Ventress. I just love that, and it was both giving Omega a task and also getting Omega out of the way, because Ventress just knew that the batch were about to like really get in her grill about who she was and stuff. And it's like, I get it. I get why the batch feel that way, because it's like, you know, Ventress in particular has been responsible for the deaths of several clones during the series. Like there's that famous moment that we've yet to get to in series 3 where she like impales that clone and just like gives him a smooch on the cheek as he dies, which is so messed up, but like it's so wonderfully dark. I feel like it makes sense for the clones for the Bad Batch to distrust her at this point, especially like they've never had the best relationship with Regs, but especially now that there are so few of them left at this point, as so far as we know, it makes sense that they'd be very hostile towards Ventress, even after she's kind of like proven herself. Like, because towards the end of the episode, they're still very kind of like they've got their guard up with Ventress. They don't trust Ventress still, which is
they were very weary of it. They had the conversations in the Marauder, and then Crosshair is like, "Oh, I found Tech's StarWars.com database, and it's who we thought it was." Which again, like people pointed out, it's like, why didn't the Jedi update that like after Dark Disciple? It's like they probably wanted to.
Oh no, yeah, they wanted to keep that. They wanted to keep that secret, like one of their own, like when Rogue and like chose like the weirdest name, like weirdest.
It's like
other
reading. Try to do a Jedi plot to assassinate Count Dooku.
Like how did fail in a Jedi
the Jedi Council lied and omitted information? What?
No.
They would never do that.
Yeah, you're gonna tell me like, and it's just hilarious that like, just to briefly mention the acolyte, that people are going, oh yeah, no, this is gonna contradict the Kiadi-Mundi's line about the Sith being extinct for a millennium. No, like the Jedi, the Council have a record of tampering with information and keeping stuff hidden. Like Dooku himself went in and erased information about Kamino. Like that's been a thing as early as Attack of the Clones, you know, and the Jedi has been
archives. That means it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Oh, Joe Castagne, how wrong you were.
Every time I like think about Kiadi-Mundi saying that line, I just think of like Yoda going like, yeah, sure. Like, yeah, you're totally right. So suddenly I can't read. Don't know it. Don't know her. Yeah. No, I think that like, I think one of the great things about that fight, though, was that it was a really cool callback to the fight that she had with with Ahsoka and the clones in The Wrong Jedi, because that was the fight where she demonstrated to Ahsoka that she was no longer trying to be a murderer. Like it was just one of those things. Like if I have to murder somebody, I will, but like I won't murder your guys. I will just knock them out. And that fight was a great demonstration of what a great hand-to-hand fighter she was. And we even saw not only those moves, or those moves, but like shout out to the Kiners, because there was a callback to the music that was used in that scene as well. Because I am that obsessive, and I went back and watched that scene, and I was like, oh, these notes are similar. This is the same kick she's using. Like I loved it. Like, of course, it was a much more like drawn out fight. It was a great show of her talents on display, but like it was a direct callback to The Wrong Jedi and the choice that she made there, where at the end all the clones were knocked out and she's like, see, it's the new me. And I love it.
Yeah, it was an excellent fight. Like I almost kind of wonder, I don't know if it's been confirmed yet, I might be wrong, but it almost seemed like the fight was mocap. It was like mocapped in a way, because the animation was so fluid compared to some of the other like fight scenes. It very much reminded me of the Ahsoka Maul duel in the Series 7, the Siege of Mandalore. It was
very fast paced.
Yeah.
So
which I was like, at first I was like, this is kind of different. I was like, I was feeling it. And then what I also loved is, like you said, it showed off Ventress in a great way, but it also showed each member of the batch's skills, but also like they are severely outmatched.
Woefully outmatched. Like I loved when Hunter like threw the blade, threw the knife, like did the like flip of the knife and threw it, thinking he was a badass, and Ventress just immediately catches it and just like flips over and does that awesome like forceful like push like with her fist and just like shoves Wrecker back into Crosshair. It's just into Hunter, sorry, because Crosshair's over on the beach getting their gear.
Another one of my favorite moments. So it's like, oh, she should come with me. Crosshair, boom, not happening. Like, and then the Bad Batch
to do everything myself.
But then the Bad Batch like theme kicking in during the fight as he tosses their gear to them. I was like, oh, Kevin Kiner is cooking so hard right now.
I think that in itself is a great explanation as to like why Ventress ultimately did not push to bring like Omega with her. Not only is it because she's probably against the whole idea of separating people from their families, as someone who was sold into slavery and never met her mother, but she also saw that even though she absolutely wiped the floor with those guys, Omega had a strong, safe foundation to be with, which is not something that I would imagine a lot of these M-Count subjects have, that she is looking for. And so not taking Omega it's not just her saying like, oh, she's not Force sensitive, because she clearly is. Crosshair calls her out on it and says you're lying. But Ventress sees about like having the but Ventress sees that Omega is safe and she has a family, and it is completely against Ventress's MO to go like, all right, I'm going to be just like the Jedi and take this child away from her family.
Yeah, something I like. Sorry to interrupt, Don, but I just want to bring up something I like that we're seeing in recent stories is that ability to choose whether or not you want to go down that path of training.
Yeah.
Because in all other stories we've seen is, oh, you're a Jedi, you have to train, and they just do.
And that's been a sorry, that's been a sorry, you finish.
I was just gonna say, with Grogu making that choice to leave Luke's academy and go back with Din, and now with Omega not really having that choice herself just yet, but Ventress purposely leaving them there for now because she knows that she has a family with the Batch and wouldn't want to be separated from them. It's different and it's refreshing from the stories that we're used to, which I really appreciate. Now, what you were going to say?
I was going to kind of build off what you were saying, really, because I was going to mention about Luke and Grogu. It's very similar to that, because just like with Luke and with Ahsoka, Ventress leaves the choice up to Omega, and because I think she understands that Omega probably would come with her if she said, "Oh no, you're Force sensitive. You have to train." I think Omega would be reluctant to leave the Batch behind, but I do think she would do it, and I think that's why Ventress is like lets the Batch have the choice of like when to let Omega go, because this episode is very much kind of setting the groundwork of where it looks like the season is going, and it really does look like the season is going to kind of build to the thing of the Batch are going to have to let Omega go off into the galaxy and do her own thing and find her own path, which is going to be
I'm not
gut-wrenching.
emotionally ready for that. All this time of after we got her back, and then just to have them separate again, I'm like, I can't do this.
It's like because it's gonna suck and it's gonna like break all our hearts, but it's very thematically appropriate for where the series has been headed, because from the start this series has essentially been 5 men and a baby like going around the galaxy, and it's all been about how do these like soldiers find a new purpose raising this kid who has never been able to like live as a child and has always just kind of known a life of just like rigorous like just regimented just programming, which is in a way a lot like how the other clones have had to live. And it's just pushing forward the question, how do the clones choose to live and find new purpose in a galaxy that has forever changed? And so it feels an appropriate place for the show to head, really, with Omega. And I do love that we have finally just pulled the trigger and gone, yes, Omega is Force sensitive. She has always been able to feel the Force. And I like that it's been through subtler means. It hasn't been just through like, oh, she did a Force, but like with Ezra, it makes sense. Ezra was hanging out with a Jedi in the first couple episodes. Of course, he would manifest the Force that way. Rey was like a super fan of the Jedi. She thought Luke Skywalker was a myth. She collected all stuff from the Rebellion. Of course, she's going to know the first thing she's going to do is do a Jedi mind trick. Omega doesn't know any of that. The Jedi are just a distant thing to Omega, and Omega has been spending time around like soldiers and just like regular people and animals as well. So it just makes sense that her Force powers manifest through this empathy and this kind of intuitive kindness that she shares with the rest of the galaxy, and it leaves an impact on every single person. I just think it's like you said, Catrina, it's very much like Leia and with Finn, how their Force abilities manifest initially through kindness. That's not to say that we won't see perhaps a more overt Force display from Omega. Maybe Omega will like use the Force to like I don't know, save the Batch like one last time during the finale. Like I've seen like all these kind of like ominous like things from people who have seen the last several episodes apart from the finale, and yeah, it's got me intrigued to see where it's going for sure. But yeah, that's my kind of thoughts with Omega.
I think it makes those scenes that we had last season with her and Gunji on Kashyyyk, and even last week with Crosshair meditating, I think it makes those even richer now that we know that, hey, yes, this high M count does like kind of what we all expected, but like to get that kind of wink and nod, like I'm not saying she's not Force sensitive, like so I like that, and I like the direction it's going in. And I'm interested in seeing the route that they go. Do we get, like you said, do we get to see more overt, like Sabine at the end of Ahsoka having that push, or is it just more in little subtle ways, like Leia in the original trilogy throughout the rest of the story? I
I
think
want to
either
shout
way
out
would
like a
fit
quick
with
thing. Sorry, I was
go
going to
ahead.
shout out like a quick thing just to add on to my point. Sorry for interrupting, but like
No worries.
there was a Twitter thread that I read. I sadly don't remember who tweeted it, but I want to shout it out because it made a lot of these kind of like similar points of like Omega's probably going to have to chart out on her own at some point because there's a very distinct recurring thing every time she's trading with Asajj Ventress. The thing that breaks her concentration and her focus is the attention of Hunter Wrecker and Crosshair. Like it's always when they're focused on her, like watching her, that her attention slips towards them, and then she loses focus. And Ventress sees that repeatedly. Like even when she's doing well with on the boat, the batch start looking at her through the electro binoculars, and then Ventress stares at them.
Ventress, how does she know we're watching her? My favorite
perfect.
scene in the whole episode.
Like I love.
Just turned.
I almost forgot. Like we were discussing the fight, and I almost forgot to like mention the fact that like you have that setup of where it looks like we're gonna get even more of the fight with the yellow blade finally coming out, Ventress like triumphantly twirling it, and it's gonna get more intense. And then Omega just comes back, and Ventress has already just like defeated all three of them. Like she's got Crosshair in the chokehold, Wrecker's like on the floor. No, Wrecker's in the chokehold, Crosshair's on the floor. Hunter's got the lightsaber to his neck. It is literally a Star Wars version of like the Troy community theme.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Just walks in with pizza, like what happened? Like
what happened?
I love it so much. And I think that like I fully agree that I think that Omega's path is going to be her ultimately making the choice to go off with Ventress. But like Omega has other objectives right now, and I think it was very smart to let her kind of have that. She isn't really given a choice, but she also does not go like, no, I want to go with Ventress, I want to do this, because Omega's focus is on those clones that are on Tantus right now, and that's her primary goal, is to go rescue her brothers and her sister / maybe sisters that are on Tantus and being subjected to torture and all of that. And then after that objective is achieved, whenever, if that ever is achieved, I think that's when we're going to see Omega go, okay, now I feel like I've done right by my family. Now I need to go figure out who I am, and that's when we're going to see her go with Ventress.
Yeah, like
Not ready
if
for
Ventress
it.
I know
shows
it's
up,
painful.
Not ready for it.
like, it's gonna be like Mando. It's gonna be like the rescue levels of like emotions, like when Mando said goodbye to Grogu. Like I've never cried at a Star Wars thing, a Star Wars like piece of media before that sequence happened. I've cried again since then, like Chapter 6 of Obi-Wan. But that was like such a high-pitched emotional scene, and I feel like that's gonna be the same here with like Omega having to say goodbye to the batch, like because we've already had such intense emotional scenes that have like definitely stolen some tears from me here and there, like losing Tech, even Omega having to say goodbye to Echo when he initially departed. Some of Crosshair's journey, it's going to be a really
don't hurt my boy. Just I
Oh,
swear,
man.
if Crosshair
He's been through enough.
he's been through enough, let him be redeemed. But no, everything you said about you both have said about this episode is just absolutely true. Like I love the direction it brings to Omega's character. I love how the Batch are continuing to open themselves up more to former enemies, people they wouldn't initially trust just because of Omega's judgment. Is kind of, we even had that like a very small example of it, but when Crosshair rejoined and Hunter was still kind of tense with him, and Wrecker was like, well, if Omega trusts him, then that's good enough for me. Like they clearly value her judgment of character more than almost anyone else's. So for them to be, all right, well, we're not so sold on this Ventress character yet, but if Omega likes her, then I guess we're along for the ride. And we kind of see that slow acceptance with Crosshair offering her the hand to get back on the Marauder after we have the fight with the sea creature, which, by the way, like slicked back wet hair Ventress. I'm
Oh,
kinda like,
man.
can that just be the permanent look? Like,
I
it
mean,
was,
like-
you know, it was a good look.
yeah,
It was a real good look, and I'm glad we got that look because, like, that was her slick back look was originally meant for the Dark Disciple episodes. There's an episode where she and Vaz go to a super fancy separatist gala, and she has her hair all slicked back. So, like, I want to give kudos to the animators for like taking that extra time to like go and give not just Ventress but like Omega that extra animation, because the underwater animation, like, I'm not an animator myself, but I know that is hard. Like, I can see, and so the detail and care that was put into this episode in particular just like blew me away. And that hairstyle is, oh man.
yeah.
I was like, women.
It's like, oh no. But we do kind of end on a bit of an ominous note, because Ventress at the beginning of the episode pointed out how easy it was for her to find them, and she didn't even have the location. She was just Fennec's client, which, by the way, I do like. We never fully mentioned it, but I do like the fact that Fennec didn't end up betraying the batch.
Yes.
Like, I think a lot of people were worried about and kind of took that last scene in episode 8 to be like, oh, well, she's selling them out. That she sent someone there that was there in their best interest, even if they didn't believe it 100% of the time. That she had some, that she wasn't sending someone going after the high M count level individuals out there, because that kind of raised questions like, well, why would Ventress be hunting people with M count? She would be wanting to help them. And I'm glad that this episode immediately cleared that up. Like, hey, yeah, Fennec's shady, but like, she likes Omega. So
I think it's
safe here.
It's a good testament to like what Fennec is as a person. Like, she's not like a great, like, nice person or anything, but like but she has the capacity to care for people, and she has the capacity to look out for people that she cares for. And she said that like, I didn't let Omega go. The client called the hit off, but like, even when she was she had Omega captive, she was still patient and caring, and we see that again in Ventress. So making the deliberate choice and knowing that Fennec has a wide network of connections, and she deliberately chose someone that she knew wouldn't try to hurt Omega or turn Omega into the Empire. I think that's a testament to like where Fennec stands when it comes to Omega, at least.
Absolutely. But we do get that, like I said, that ominous warning that, hey, you're probably not safe from the Empire on Pabu, or is not as safe as much as you think. So next week, 2-parter. I'm very worried. Very worried.
I mean, there's a reason it's a 2-parter. We've seen the trailer shots. We've seen TK troopers on Pabu. We've seen that mysterious clone assassin there. I wouldn't be surprised if this next 2-parter is essentially Pabu getting discovered and the batch having to make it out, try and evacuate everyone potentially, or just fight the Empire off. I don't think Pabu is going to survive in terms of like a location, because I think once the Empire knows that the batch are there, potentially it might just be that the batch have to hide and potentially just leave to erase any suspicion that they were there. But yeah, it potentially isn't very good. It's possible. I think it's very possible we might learn the identity of that clone assassin in this 2-part, because for me, it makes sense really that we would learn who they are here. I'm still hanging on to the slimmest possibility, because I think Andrew's theory is a little more possible now, but I just like the theory of it being tech a lot more. I think it gives the finale so much more emotional stakes for me. But I would be happy with a Crosshair clone, I suppose.
I don't know what it's going to be, but I think we're definitely going to get that. And it's been a long time since we've had a physical appearance from that evil Dr. Hemlock. So I can only imagine we're going to see him again next week.
It could be like a Hemlock hybrid clone, potentially, because he has the gloved hand, so it's very possible maybe he amputated his own hand and used that DNA to like do experiments and sort of combine his DNA with the clones, kind of like what the Greg Pak Darth Vader comic hinted at with, you know, Luke's hand being recovered by the Emperor and sort of floating in a bacta tank on Exegol. I mean, there's also the possibility that, you know, the clone assassin will take the helmet off and they will like shrink several feet and it'll turn out to be Sid.
No.
I
Why do
love
you
it.
do this to me?
I'm making a Power Rangers
Oh.
reference. I clocked Catrina's awesome Mighty Morphin helmet, and I just immediately thought of Power Rangers Turbo.
I'm gonna
Amazing.
take your mention of Luke's hand and just say I just think it's crazy that we're getting an actual Luke Black Series figure at this point.
Yeah,
Like
I love it.
He takes the helmet off, and it's Crew's hair
Crew's hair. Yep.
or
That's who it
Crew's
is.
hair.
Hem Luke.
And Luke.
Oh my goodness.
Oh.
George, like, all right, so we need an evil Luke. Just put another U in there. Like, it's I know it was Timothy Zahn, but like, I can just George. I got an idea. Like, what should I name this evil clone Luke Skywalker?
Whatever.
Luke, whatever. I'm not gonna read it. I don't care. Like, it's just.
Another thing I wanted to kind of ask both of you, like with regards to Ventress, is do you think that she could pop up again during the season, potentially even in the finale, or do you think this is like very much like Ahsoka in The Mandalorian season 2, where this is like a one and done for her, and she will exclusively be appearing in future projects like animated series or live action?
So the title of the finale is "The Cavalry Has Arrived" or something along those. And I something about that says, like, you know, not only will we see clones, but we're going to see allies of the clones. And I don't think we're going to see Ventress much else in this series. She clearly has other things to do, and she was like, well, she's good here, so I'm just going to leave her here and leave her with these guys and go handle my other business. But like she said, like, they're easy to find, especially for her. So I feel like if things hit the fan and they need allies to come in, that finale it's the only place I could feasibly see Ventress coming back and helping, and maybe that being the moment where Omega goes, okay, I have to go now. Like, I need to go. I have a really big theory about like the overall of like what's going to happen with Omega, what's going to happen with the batch, and how it leads into like the path that was mentioned in Obi-Wan. But yeah.
That sounds fascinating. Yeah.
Now, before you go, I was going to say I'm leaning towards this is it, which is different than what I was thinking last week. Because I think Don mentioned, I think it's just going to be the one episode. Like, I can see it being more than that. After this week, I think it's that, but I think it's clearly like leading to whatever our next animated series is. I think Ventress is going to play a big role in it. I think it's very similar to the Batch's own arc in Clone Wars Season 7, where it's a backdoor pilot to whether it's the hidden path or whatever they want to do next. It's like, road trip comedy with Quinlan and Ventress. Like, literally, I mean, take it.
Ventress could show up in the finale, and she could be like, "I brought a friend," and then Quinlan Voss just like pops in, and then they adopt Omega as like their enthusiastic little kid. Which would
don't know if Ventress is going to be necessarily the lead character in the next series, but I think she's going to play a huge role, and
Agreed.
I wouldn't be shocked if she's Tales of the Jedi season 2 as well. Just because I think they have a lot. They're like, hey, remember that time that we weren't allowed to use Ventress with Resistance season 2? It's like we're going to use her as much as we can now. But that's where I'm leaning towards. I do like if Catrina's idea about Omega going with Ventress is what they're leaning towards. I like that idea because that means that I'm not going to have to say goodbye to Omega after the show is done. And she continues on. But I could be wrong, but that's my thoughts. Where are you leaning at this point, Don?
So I as much as I was joking about like the finale, I do agree that I think this is like the only appearance, because this episode very much reminded me of the Jedi episode of The Mandalorian. It was very kind of self-contained. It was all about giving us a snapshot of this guest character, you know, in this case Ventress, like seeing how much they have changed since their last appearance in the Clone Wars, and seeing how much they've changed, and sort of adding some mystery of like, oh, what are they doing now? Where are they going next? Like, how are they sort of different now? Like, obviously we have that extra information of Dark Disciple, but I definitely think they're going to explore it somehow, whether that's like Tales of the Jedi stuff. I personally would love if they did like a direct to Disney Plus like animated film or miniseries that adapted Dark Disciple. I think that'd be really good. I also think you're absolutely right about Ventress playing a major role in whatever animated series they do next, because there's definitely shows like that in production. I mean, I've also joked about it. I would love it if Obi-Wan season 2 was just announced and it was just Obi-Wan reuniting Ventress and Quinlan Vos like he's the titular character in Jane Austen's Emma. It would just be like, it might not be to everyone's taste, but I would personally watch it, and I just would love to see Ewan McGregor like flirt with Ventress in live action. It would be great.
Oh my god.
The final thing I'll say is I definitely think this is paving the way for Ventress to make some kind of live action appearance at some point, because I feel like you're not gonna bring her back and not like put her in the shows at some point, like reunite her with Ahsoka and involve her in the fight against Thrawn. She got a mention in the episode, in the penultimate episode of Ahsoka, so it just feels kind of thematically appropriate. Maybe we get more Clone Wars flashbacks and we see Hayden Christensen fight Ventress in live action. That would be crazy.
That was just hearing him say the name Asajj Ventress was like enough of a shock to the system. Like,
seriously,
would be something.
I have a fan casting already, mainly because I have been playing so much Baldur's Gate at 3, but I kind of feel like the actress who plays the character Lae'zel, Devora Wild, would be a good shout for Ventress. She's got enough of the kind of like look, and she's so good at like playing this kind of like aggressive, like almost kind of like snarly tone of voice that Lae'zel has. I feel like she could translate well to Ventress. Another pick I kind of floated in my head for a while was Elizabeth Olsen. I'm not sure if that if like fully works, but I feel like Elizabeth Olsen's really good at channeling darkness, as we saw in Multiverse of Madness really well. Whether she'd be willing to like wear a bald cap or shave her head is another thing, really.
Yeah, I feel like my Ventress fan castings are a little on the out of left field. But I like from the beginning, like the first time I saw Black Panther, I was like, Denai Guerrera could be Ventress.
Yeah.
Like, she's got those cheekbones.
Oh my god.
She's fierce. She knows how to fight. She would be incredible. My other would be, I don't know if you all have seen The Haunting of Bly Manor, but Tania Miller, who plays Hannah Gross in that, is also one of those people who not only has the bone structure, but like the acting chops to bring someone so emotional into the fold. And while Ventress does have hair now, they both look super good bald. So, you know, if she has to film flashback scenes, I definitely think like those are like my two for Ventress.
Those are good picks.
I can't say I have any off the top of my head, but I'm vibing with what you're both throwing down.
Yeah.
As someone who has not played Baldur's Gate, I'm gonna take your word for it. I'll get there eventually.
With Baldur's Gate stuff.
I'll get there eventually.
Throwing stuff in there like no context.
Come into the Baldur's Gate fold. It's wonderful here.
It's wonderful here. But yeah, we talked a lot about the Harbinger, and I'm sure we could keep going and going. It's just great to have a character like Asajj Ventress back in the fold now and be like, oh, what are these new stories we can think of? Like, it's just it's a great feeling. And I think it was the more I think about it, like, we have gone back and revisited characters that have died in the past, but like they purposely, I think, didn't tell, as far as I'm aware, any new Ventress stories for a long time. Like, I think that Age of Republic comic was the last one I can recall.
We've had a couple, the hyperspace stories with the Halcyon. She interrupted Padme and Anakin's honeymoon. But there have been like little,
she was
and Brotherhood, which I consulted on. She showed up in that.
Way.
Yeah.
Consulted on that. You did your job really well.
Yeah, it was great. It was amazing.
Forget everything I just said about them ignoring her character.
That's what like played into all of my excitement, like leading up to this. Is like over the years, I was like, oh, she's showing up a lot more. We're getting more Ventress merch. We're getting Ventress's sabers in Galaxy's Edge, like not just her normal sabers, her first Redemption saber model that then became Maul's season 7 saber. So like, I'm saving up money first off to go to Galaxy's Edge and buy whatever new saber they drop there from this episode. But yeah, like I started noticing more and more each year, and I was like, I think Ventress is coming back. I don't know how or when, but like I think she's coming back. So yeah,
And then boom,
Boom.
what do you know?
Boom.
amazing.
Yeah, it's
I love
great.
Brotherhood. For the record, it was on mine and Andrew's like
Oh, I
top
love
five
Brotherhood.
things of like Star Wars media of like 2022. It was just such a great book, and I love, you did a great job consulting with Ventress. I have to say, like all of the stuff, like her mannerisms with like Obi-Wan, like them meeting for the first time, even the fact that like she has the ship from 2003 Clone Wars, and Anakin recognizes the ship. I was like as someone who grew up like big like obsessively rewatching season 1 of like Genji Tarkovsky's Clone Wars and just loving all of the animation and drinking in all the visuals, that was another nice touch.
Oh yeah,
Andrew,
Mike Chen did such a good job with that. Like I played a very small part in it, but like every page that she was on, I was like, this is her. This is exactly what she was. And so it was also as satisfying watching this episode and going like, this is absolutely where I thought she would be at this point in time, like mentally, emotionally, like this is 100% authentic to what I was hoping for. And just like they did such a great job with her in this episode. And
If you
I'm
get
so
the
excited.
Catrina seal of approval with Ventress, you're doing something right.
indeed.
But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in and listening to our recap of the Harbinger. Speaking of various Ventress stories and various projects, Catrina, where can the people find you, and what Ventress related things have you done if people want to check them out?
You all can find me anywhere at Catrina. That's OHCATRINA on all the social medias. I host and co-host 3 podcasts. One of them is known as Pedro Pascal, the podcast about Pedro Pascal. One of them is also known as What's Glup, where we talk about everybody's favorite scrungly little guys from Star Wars. And the third is In the Cantina with Catrina, where I talk to Star Wars fans about what they do and why they love Star Wars. I have 2 Ventress fanfic stories out. One of them is called Ventress Golden, an homage to Christy Golden, who wrote Dark Disciple, and it is about how Ventress acquires her new lightsaber, and it is still canon, technically, even though it's a fanfic. It works with canon, which I'm very happy with. It is, and then the other one is called Howl of the Banshee, about how she acquired the second Banshee, the Lancer class pursuit craft that she used in Dark Disciple, along with liberating a family of servants from the Black Sun Syndicate. And it's like a duology that I contributed to her Vendemption era. So they're out there, they're free. It's about like an hour's worth of good chunky reading, both of them. So yeah.
Perfect. Donovan, as for yourself, where can everyone find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Donovan Mead, also on TikTok at Donovan McComish, Instagram at Donovan_McComish, Threads Donovan_McComish as well, and Blue Sky you can find me at DonovanMcComish.bsky.social. I have to shout out Arzu D2 for sending me the invite code originally back then. Thank you so much, Arzu. You can also find me as a question writer on Star Wars Inner Galaxy Epic Confrontations, along with Connor and Eli. Yeah. Andrew's dreading his next matchup for sure. But yeah, we've got we have a bunch of interesting personalities come on and go head to head with Star Wars trivia. We got a bunch of cool episodes coming up, and also like Andrew and Connor, former friend of the pod, Jake and Catrina, I have been a writer for SWEF, or Star Wars Editor Fiction. Ventress Golden was one of the stories initially published back when we were first kind of like doing our initial group of stories. We have now consolidated together. There's like a story group, and we are currently kind of working on the next phase of our stories. We try to stay within canon with our fan fiction, but we like to also lift a few bits and pieces from Legends if we feel that it fits in the story. I have got one story out currently that I published back in June of 2022. It is called Scars of War, and it stars a clone trooper called Blister, who deserted the newly formed Empire after Order 66, and whose peaceful existence on the planet Kivo in the Outer Rim is interrupted 5 years after Revenge of the Sith by the arrival of a Jedi survivor named Shar Kun. And it's all about them kind of reconciling their shared trauma over that incident. So if you like Star Wars and pain, check it out. I had a lot of fun writing it. And again, major shout out to Jake for doing an excellent piece of cover art. Thanks so much, buddy. Appreciate it.
As for myself, I'll be quick. You can follow me everywhere at Starlight Andrew. You can follow the pod on Twitter at For the Repub Pod and on Instagram and TikTok at For the Republic Pod for updates on what we're doing and when new episodes are coming out. We are still in the process of getting our Glut Madness tournament going. So we have 4 reps left. If you're interested in having one of your favorite Glut Shittos represented in the tournament, let me or Donovan or Connor know, and we will add you there. 4 more, and then we can get the brackets going. And then just make sure, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you listen to the podcast, support us in any way you can. Next week, it's going to be a bit earlier for our recaps than we normally put them out. We have a 2-parter coming, but I'm going to be going out of town on Thursday. So we're hoping to get the episode recorded on Wednesday and have it up for you that Thursday. Thank you once again for Catrina for coming on and joining us to talk about Ventress. And it was a pleasure as always. But until next time,
Was indeed.
thank you guys for joining us, and may the force be with you always.